Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8th episode of Honest Discussions. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Patterson, and today we are talking to Dr. Micheal Leon, who is from the Institute for Memory Impairments and Neurological Disorders at California. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of Honest Discussions. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of Honest Discussions. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Patterson, and today we're going to be talking to Dr. Micheal Leon, who works at the Institute for Memory Impairments and Neurological. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of Honest Discussions. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Patterson. And today we're going to be talking to Micheal Leon, who works at the Institute for Memory Impairments and Neurological Disorders at the University of California, Irvine. This was a really fascinating discussion. Micheal's work on the olfactory system has revealed that our ability to smell as we age is directly linked to all forms of dementia as well as all-cause mortality, which is dying for any reason. The moral of the story is keep your sniffer working. We discuss how the olfactory system is hardwired directly into your brain, and particularly into your memory centers, and that any impairment in this system can have significant effects on developing multiple types of neurological disorders. We also discuss how other diseases, including autism, can be improved through odor therapy. I encourage you to check out his website, Memory Air, which I learned about during the podcast, where you can start your own odor therapy routine. Just a really fascinating talk that went a lot of places that I didn't expect. I learned a ton. I think you will too. And if you do, if you could please like, share, subscribe, help us get to that 1,000 subscribers mark, it would be greatly appreciated. We're getting there, but we still need some help. And with just a couple of clicks, you can do that. So on that note, on with the show.
Yeah, it turns out that the olfactory system has the only, what we call the superhighway into the memory centers of the brain. All the other parts, all the other senses have to go through the thalamus, which greatly decreases their impact on these areas. They do have an impact on the health of the memory centers, but the olfactory system has a much greater impact because of its direct access to those areas. And so when you take it away, the memory centers deteriorate. And what we and others have shown that if you give more stimulation, the stimulation we're not getting in our modern affluent world, you can actually improve those memory centers and memory improves.
It is, I wonder why that is, why only the olfactory system doesn't need a translator before being recorded as a memory. Like, that's kind of what the thalamus and everything else is doing. It's translating what's going on into, I would assume, some type of storable memory. But
so nobody knows any of that. But the one way to think about it is that chemosensation, that is sensing chemicals in the environment, is the earliest sense system that any animal, even unicellular one-cell animals, have. And so maybe things started in more complicated animals with just the olfactory stimulation. And so it has its own separate pathways that have come through historically, and all the other senses have come later in a more complex brain, perhaps. And so they go through the thalamus, and that's a made-up story, but it's plausible.
Well, part of this podcast, what it's meant to do is to show how little we know with how much we know, because we do know so much. We really do. However, we know nothing. we really don't know anything. Every single uh, law of how the human body works uh, may be completely erased 50 years from now from what we find during that time. That's at least how I look at it.
Well, I think we do know something, and we're building on it. And one of the things that's become clear is that rather than looking at individual reports, individual experiments, it's really important to look at the whole literature. And what the whole literature is telling us is very consistent. If you don't have enough olfactory stimulation, your brain is not as good as it is when it has plenty of olfactory stimulation. And in our world now, if you took a deep breath, now you probably wouldn't smell anything at all. And over the course of your life, you can get multiple experiences that actually damage the olfactory system because it's the only neurons that are exposed to the real world. All the other neurons are encased in various things.
And
And so,
protected.
air pollution, toxins, cigarette smoke, chronic stress in childhood, chronic stuffed nose, menopause, a variety of medications, head trauma, and of course, COVID.
Allergies.
Allergies will give you the chronically stuffed nose, and all of those not only decrease your olfactory stimulation, but they also can impair memory. And so over the course of your lifetime, by the time you hit about 60 years old, both your memory and your olfactory ability start to go off a cliff. And they continue to go hand in hand throughout the rest of your life.
Is there any way to improve your ability to smell as you age?
Yeah, so olfactory enrichment will do that. Some people call it olfactory training, but basically it's giving people multiple odors on a regular basis. So it's hard to get people to do a lot of them, but if you can get even demented older adults, if you can give them 40 odors twice a day, their memory actually improves dramatically, as do their depression symptoms. And so it's better than any of the hundreds of trials with drugs that have been tested over the years. This actually works. So it's low cost, but it's high effort. And so not many people will be doing it. We've actually designed a device that puts out 40 odors while you sleep, and that will allow people to get that kind of stimulation at any time of life without any effort and at low cost, and have it be effective. The device is called Memory Air, and if anybody's interested, they can go to that website and sign up to be notified for it.
So this is something that's coming out.
Yeah, it'll be out by probably late fall, and it actually gives 40 odors to you as you sleep without doing anything. So it gives you this really powerful stimulation.
So when they say go out and smell the roses, this is actually a very important thing that we should all be doing on a regular basis.
Well, I would say smell the roses and smell everything else in the garden, because it's the number of odors that really impacts the brain, and novelty, which is a critical component of this, is another important aspect of it. And so just smelling roses is pleasant, but it probably won't give you the kind of impact on the memory centers of your brain that it needs.
Well, before we dig into the science of it, and since we're on this topic of the number of stimulants helping, so you're saying that acrid odors that you don't get on a regular basis, these are actually good things. So to get things even that are unpleasant, sulfurous odors, smoky, probably not smoky odors, but right. That is an odor. It's
right.
Just
so we don't know that for sure. We don't know that for sure because we wanted people to have this in their bedrooms, and most people don't want unpleasant odors in their bedrooms.
No.
And it's also possible that some of the unpleasant odors also have an irritation quality to them that's sensed by another nerve set in your head called the trigeminal nerve, and that can be irritating and unpleasant. So our feeling is that as long as the pleasant odors work, and people like them and will use them, we should stick to those. And maybe somebody who's more interested in the esoteric aspects of this can look at it with unpleasant odors.
So there are roughly, I can't remember how many classes of odors, because there is kind of a, I mean, even though like dogs have so many more different and they can smell way more than we can, they still all kind of fall into certain classes of odorants, right?
Yeah, people sort of would like to put them in silos, but very often you have odors that are in more than one silo. And so, it's spicy, but floral. And so it's much more complex than people have. There's no simple organization of odors, as you can see with hearing or light. It's much more complex. But some people have organized them, I think, in a very interesting way. It's just, it's not clear what we should do with all that at this point.
Well, that could very easily be because how you get something that's sweet and spicy and floral is that two different receptors can recognize the same molecule there that are primed for those odorants. So it's really more, it wouldn't be that the scents themselves are classified, but the odorant receptors maybe can be best classified into silos then. But even there, you don't know how they're going to interact with one another to create new, what's the word I'm looking for? Not new scents, but new stimuli.
New perception.
Yeah, so, new perception.
We spent a decade looking at all of the very fine aspects of olfactory coding, how the brain takes in different chemicals, how it processes those that are similar and that are different. And we think we have a pretty good idea of what's going on. It probably is, it's a field of study that's really different from looking to see how it stimulates the memory parts of your brain. So, they're certainly connected in some ways. It's easy to remember odors and not easy to remember others. But the neurobiology of olfactory coding, that is taking chemicals and putting it to neural language, it still remains pretty complex. And we sort of understand what happens at the first interaction and the second interaction. And after that, it just gets really, really complicated.
It gets lost.
So we kind of know what's going on. Yeah. It goes from being highly specific in spatial organization to being highly distributed. And that's where it's hard for us to track what's going on once it gets to, for example, the olfactory cortex.
Yeah, some of the people that I've spoken with already, they're trying to do those types of measurements for things like consciousness, and it's incredibly hard to do those measurements.
Yes.
Especially on a human being. Like, it's hard to do it on an animal, and it's near impossible to do correctly on a human being, even though with one of the techniques that you're using with MRI, certainly there's a window into it, but we can't see individual cells so much doing very specific things and monitor every little thing. It's just difficult to do from the outside in.
Yeah, so there are at least two labs other than ours, maybe three or four, that are doing really interesting work on olfaction in humans. Noam Sobel's lab at the Weizmann Institute in Israel, and Professor Hummel, who's at Dresden University in Germany. Both of them are doing outstanding work with humans and their olfactory systems. And it's for example, if you give people who have PTSD olfactory stimulation while they sleep, their nightmares start to get more pleasant. They stop having these awful experiences at night when these awful memories come back at them, to wake them up and to make their daytime experiences unpleasant. So there's a lot of things that you mentioned, that humans don't have the abilities that dogs do. One of the things that Sobel found is that humans can actually track an odor in the grass. I mean, they can actually do the kinds of things that you think only specialized dogs do. Humans can actually have very fine olfactory ability, but it's something that is really not known generally.
Well, but it sounds like it can be that it needs trained. That's what you're suggesting, even with the treatment, that it's part of it is training, like that you're learning, not necessarily, well, it is a type of learning, a physical learning of detecting odorants and being aware of them.
Yeah. So people are mostly unaware of their olfactory system. And in fact, if you ask them which sense they would most be willing to give up, it's the olfactory system. And
that's crazy.
Yes. So they are.
They must not like to eat.
Yeah. So eating is actually interesting because most people think taste is and flavor are mediated by your tongue. But in fact, most of the sensation that you get when you're eating is through what we call retronasal stimulation, which means that the odors come through the back of the mouth, through the front of the nose. And other than sweet, sour, salty, bitty, and bitter, and protein like umami, that's the only thing that the tongue does. All the other odors that contribute to the flavor go through your nose. And to show you this, you can drink some coffee and hold your nose while you're doing it, and it'll just taste bitter or whatever else you have. It won't taste like coffee. And so it's a critical part of our food intake.
So, well, that's how when you take a sommelier class, part of their expertise in defining the odorants of the wine or what the flavors are is how they breathe while they're drinking it, and that enables them to pick up more of the vanilla flavor or the peat flavor or whatever's contained in the wine.
Yeah, and it's been shown that the sommeliers, the professional wine tasters, they train by sniffing dozens of odors a day over the course of months. And their entorhinal cortex, critical part of the memory system in your brain, increases dramatically in response to that kind of stimulation. And so they're one of the key sorts of data that show you that at any age, these are young adults, stimulating the memory centers in your brain with olfactory stimuli can be very effective.
That is cool. One thing I wanted to point out from earlier before we get in to the next section is when you were talking about, the first things that single-celled organisms do is smell. And for people that aren't necessarily scientists to understand, that's actually true because they have little receptors on the outside of their cell. And those receptors, when they bind to whatever it is, they send a signal, they smell it, and that sends a signal like, oh, this is food, move towards it. Or, oh, this is a predator chemical, so I need to swim away from the direction that I'm sensing it. So it really is the beginnings of the smell sensory system.
Yeah.
So let me see here. Oh, why did you choose this as an area of study? What would because I know there had to be some level of hardship that comes with trying to do these types of studies. You're not making a drug. You're not making, this instant deliverable. You're using something that there are many would want to call woo-woo science. So how do you get into doing this, and what, because the study's great, which we're going to get into, but how did you get into it?
Yeah, so we've been studying olfaction for many years in various kinds of interactions between mothers and babies, for example. We've shown that mothers can have an odor on the first day of life that attracts their babies, and the babies can learn to be attracted to the odor or any arbitrary odor that you give them on the first day of life if you pair it with tactile stimulation, soothing the baby with your hand. And we've then become very familiar, as most neuroscientists are, with a very large literature showing that environmental enrichment has all kinds of great impacts on the quality of the brain, the connections of the brain, and the functional parts of the brain, the behavior. And what that means is that most lab animals are kept in a box cage, isolated, and they look fine, they have normal behaviors, but if you put them in a much larger cage with some friends and some novel things to do on a regular basis, their brain just becomes much, much more complex and much more capable. And even more interesting, I think, is that whenever people have made animal models of human neurological disorders, anorexia, anxiety, depression, and on and on, if you put them in a box cage, they'll show you all of the human-like neurological symptoms, but not if you put them in the enriched environment with friends and more things to do and all that. And so what it looks like, I mean, if I told you that if I gave a drug to these animals that have, an animal model of Alzheimer's disease, for example, or autism, and they got much better, you'd say, well, let's try this on humans. But nobody had done that. And so we tried to do it with children who have autism. There are 7 animal models of autism, and all of them have their symptoms improve greatly when you put them in an enriched environment. And so we thought this was a doable kind of thing. There was also some evidence in the human literature that suggested it might work. There was a dictator of Romania called Nicolae Ceausescu, and he had all kinds of interesting theories about what should be done. So he first beggared the economy, so things went downhill very quickly. But then he decided that there needed to be more people in the country, and so he outlawed contraception. And so there were now a lot of poor people who had babies, they couldn't take care of them. And so they brought them to the state-sponsored orphanages. And they kept them fed and clean, but they didn't give them any kind of stimulation. In fact, these children were in the human equivalent to a standard box cage. They were left alone, they were isolated, and eventually about a third of them developed autism-like symptoms. That's compared to 1% to 2% of kids in the United States. And so decreasing their sensory and motor stimulation increased the probability of them having autism symptoms. Then what happened is they took these kids and brought them to a high quality foster care in which the parents would pay full time for taking care of these kids. So they got a lot of stimulation, and many of them improved dramatically when they increased sensory motor stimulation. And so we thought that we could mimic this in Orange County, California. And we gave the parents a kit with all kinds of novel stimuli in it. And every 2 weeks, we gave them new instructions about how to do this. And we focused our stimulation on olfactory stimulation because it has the only direct impact into the memory centers, but it also has the only direct impact into the emotional center of the brain, the amygdala. And so the children had this stimulation. And over the course of 6 months, these were all seriously affected children with classic autism. There was a dramatic improvement in their symptoms. 42% had a major improvement in their symptoms compared to 7% who were in standard care without this kind of stimulation. After 6 months, 21% were no longer considered to have classic autism, compared to 0% in standard care. And all sorts of other things improved. Their communication improved, their sensory responsiveness improved, eating, sleeping, mood, all of these things improved in these children. And so it's now been commercialized. Anybody can access it, and people are using it all over the world. The website is Mendability, MEND ability, one word.
I'll be sure and put all of this stuff in the description. I had no idea about that. That's shocking, actually.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So, yeah, I think people didn't use environmental enrichment for systematic treatments because they thought that you couldn't be more stimulated than you are in the modern American world. And so,
well, can I stop you right there for 1 second? Because
sure.
I was kind of thinking the same thing while you were talking. However, what crept into my mind is first of all, you can have the effect of too much stimulation is the same as no stimulation. Because if there's so much going on around you, you can't focus on anything. And therefore, there may as well be nothing there because you can't focus on anything. That's number one. But then the other thing is it also comes down to the type of stimulation. Is it that we're just not getting the right type of stimulation? And what I'm hearing is, well, we know the modern world doesn't have a lot of smell stimulation, unless other than obnoxious ones for the most part. And therefore, is this something that we're kind of missing the boat, where some of these childhood disorders like autism, and I'm sure there are a bunch more, are caused by this lack of stimulation, causing a lack of development, of proper development in the young brain, which is developing constantly.
So we think that people in our modern affluent world are chronically deprived of olfactory stimulation. And in fact, that was one of the nice things about the public health advances over the last century. Virtually nothing smells anymore, either good or bad. And you can see that people are really motivated to get olfactory stimulation, because if you, produce a consumer product that isn't scented, nobody will buy it. Right. So try to buy an unscented shampoo, for example. It's hard to find them because almost nobody wants that. Some people do, but what you find is that people would like their clothes to smell a certain way, and they like, they have these scents that are perfused throughout their house, and it tells you that I think people want to get sensory stimulation, olfactory stimulation. They're not getting it, and all we're doing is we're giving them an organized, sensible way of getting the olfactory stimulation that their brain needs. And that's probably true from birth until the end of life. You can always need more sensory stimulation, particularly olfactory stimulation.
Well, we should talk about your study, and really I guess the first thing to ask is well, I guess this is where we can start. What is the I have a hard time pronouncing this, the uncinate fasciculus? Did I get it right?
No, nobody gets it right. It's the uncinate fasciculus. And what it is,
now I got it, the uncinate fasciculus, no problem.
Yeah,
so what is the uncinate fasciculus, and why is it so poorly understood? Because it is pretty poorly understood.
Yeah, so it's a pathway between the memory centers of the brain that initiate memory formation and the memory centers of the brain that hold that memory in the cortex. And so this memory pathway deteriorates as you get older, and it deteriorates further if you have dementia. And so what we're showing is that we can modify this pathway with this kind of stimulation. And what I find compelling is that the extent of the change in both behavior and brain are almost identical. And so it looks like there's something significant going on in the brain that's related to something equally significant going on with the improvement in memory.
Yeah, because from what I read, it seems like a lot of studies can kind of causally link that organ into, or that part of the brain into, lots of different memory behaviors. But then when they try and do the very specific experiment, it doesn't seem to hold up sometimes. So it appears like it's probably this major node in the network that, but also must have some compensatory nodes that can pick up the slack when it's not functioning at 100%. You know, that there's some type of distribution of the workload of that to other areas that maybe can pick up the slack when they do these directed experiments. But
yeah.
But what your study showed is that, well, I'll let you describe. You should describe the study, because it's really interesting how you set it up, and that it includes COVID patients, which is interesting.
Yeah. So after the age of 60, as I mentioned, your memory starts to go south, your olfactory system starts to go south, and virtually everybody over that age will complain of some memory loss. And of course, as they get older, the memory loss accelerates and they have worse and worse memory. So people are very motivated to do something about this. Memory loss is the most feared medical problem of older adults. And most people either know or have some connection to somebody who has dementia or who's had dementia. And so we recruited a bunch of people who were over 60, between 60 and 85. And we either gave them olfactory enrichment at night. Again, we wanted to make sure everybody did it, and we know that people know where they're going to be while they're sleeping. So and because of the limitations on the technical devices, we could only do one odor at a time, but we gave it for 2 hours at night. So a significant amount of olfactory stimulation, but while they were sleeping, so they didn't have to do anything in order to get that kind of stimulation. And we changed it every night for 7 nights and then started all over again. And over 6 months, they had a dramatic increase in their memory compared to a similar group of older adults that didn't get that kind of stimulation. The improvement was 226% better than the unstimulated older adults.
What was the test that you used for the memory? What was the memory test you used?
We used a standard memory test called the Ray Auditory Verbal Learning Test. And it's basically, I read a list of words to you, you try to remember them, I do it again and again. And the idea is that it's very sensitive to memory and memory loss and memory recovery. And so people were able to get better on that test simply by having this kind of stimulation. And it's really minimal olfactory enrichment. We're not giving them dozens of odors a day. We're just giving them one for a long period. And we think that with more odors each day, things will even be better.
Well, so we're already talking about autism. We're talking about memory loss in elderly people. We're talking about dementia. There are that's 3 huge areas of medicine, all of which are multi-billion-dollar parts of the pharmaceutical industry that you could be having a significant impact on. Please go on.
Yes. In fact, all of the dementias, not only Alzheimer's disease, but frontotemporal, semantic, Creutzfeldt-Jakob dementia, all of the Lewy body dementia, all of them are associated with olfactory loss. And in fact, virtually all neurological and psychiatric disorders are accompanied by olfactory loss. So Parkinson's disease, schizophrenia, stroke, depression, epilepsy, anorexia, anxiety, ADHD. I've counted 68 neurological disorders that are associated with olfactory loss. And so it's possible that we can use olfaction to either treat or prevent the symptoms of these diseases from occurring. So this is a complex concept, so let me try to explain it. So the idea is that you can have a disease or a disorder, but not express the symptoms of it. And that's hard to grasp when first confronted with it. But when you look at people who have the neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease, that is, you look at their brains full of plaques, full of tangles, some people have
completely
memory.
Normal function, yes.
Right? And others who have very little of these hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease have profound memory loss.
This is something that's been why it was argued and still is argued whether the tangles are, while they correlate with Alzheimer's, they may very well not be the cause, right, of Alzheimer's because of exactly what you said. An interesting one for you. There were these patients in England in the early 1900s that this construction worker had gotten a bar, like a steel bar, that had gone into his skull. And he wasn't the brightest person in the world, apparently, but he was your average working Joe. And when they investigated the inside of his head, he had possibly like 1 inch of brain matter, and that was it in his whole head. So most of his brain was just simply of white matter, was just simply not there. Yet he had nearly normal functioning, or many considered normal functioning. So what you're saying,
the difference between people who have the neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease and don't have the memory loss is that these people tend to be highly educated, highly social, have careers that stimulate their brain throughout life. And this is called the cognitive reserve. That is, if you give people enough environmental enrichment through their lives, they actually can have the disease, that is, they have all the pathology in their brain of Alzheimer's disease, but they don't have the memory problems, they don't have the symptoms. And what that suggests to me is that maybe we can short circuit all of these things. So we can't send people back to get law degrees when they're 60, but maybe we can give them olfactory stimulation, and that can replace the lifelong stimulation that people get with high levels of intellectual stimulation. And so that may be why you can get people with dementia to improve so dramatically by giving them 40 odors twice a day. It's because you're now giving them the environmental enrichment that their brain needs. You can get it either through giving them a great deal of intellectual stimulation, or you can give them rapid access to stimulating the memory centers of their brain simply by giving them olfactory enrichment.
What kind of feedback have you gotten on this? Are there other people that are willing to start looking into this? Because it seems like, from what you're saying, there's 60-something neurological disorders that could potentially benefit, and the only thing that needs to happen is a study, and a really inexpensive study at that.
Yeah, so there are already 2 reports of depression symptoms being alleviated with olfactory enrichment. And there's an opportunity, I think, for people to try to treat these various neurological disorders with olfactory stimulation, and even better, to prevent the occurrence of the symptoms before people get it. That is, I think it would be great if we could shift olfactory enrichment from being a medical action to being a public health program. That is, instead of waiting to see if people get sick and then giving them the stimulation, maybe people need olfactory enrichment from the word go and throughout their
In a modern
lives in order to
society.
avoid, right? So it's one of the externalities of modern society is that you have all these wonderful things, but in getting them, you have no olfactory stimulation on a typical day. And so maybe that's making us vulnerable to the expression of all the symptoms from all these neurological disorders. And maybe we can prevent that. We can't prevent them from getting the disease, but maybe we can prevent them from expressing the symptoms. And that would be just fine for me.
Well, it sounds like if you have any type of anosmia or you start losing any amount of your sense of smell, you should consider that a real canary in the coal mine, and you should see your physician immediately, is what that sounds like.
So there are now 7 major epidemiological studies showing that by midlife, your all-cause mortality, that is, whether you live or whether you die for any reason, can be predicted by your ability to smell things. So there is a dramatic effect on it. It also turns out that olfactory loss is seen with heart disease, cancer, liver disease, lung disease, kidney disease, all of the things that are likely to kill you. All of them are associated with olfactory loss. And so it may be not just the neurological problems, but it may be the fact that all of these other problems involve the immune system, inflammation, and maybe the olfactory stimulation can short circuit those problems as well.
Well, we're going to come back to that because I have a question I'm saving for the end that really hits that on the head. But so for the COVID patients in your study, now I know you had a smaller number of them, but maybe you could explain what the outcome was and why you believe it happened that way.
So we unfortunately we're running the study and the COVID problem came and descended on us, and so we had to short circuit the study, have many fewer participants than we wanted, but we did have some individuals who had olfactory loss with COVID, and they were doing fine in our study. A very large study was done by researchers from Oxford University, where they looked at the brains of hundreds of individuals who had recovered from mild COVID months before. And they saw a dramatic deterioration of the olfactory superhighway and deterioration of the memory centers attached to that. And they also found continuing memory loss in adults who had recovered from mild COVID months before. And others have found that you can predict the extent of memory loss after COVID from the severity of the olfactory loss. And since the loss of olfaction is actually the first symptom of Alzheimer's disease, there has been a predicted increase in the number of Alzheimer's cases over the course of the pandemic. And so there's a very intimate relationship between olfaction and Alzheimer's. It's not only the first symptom of it, but you can actually predict which older individuals are more likely to get mild cognitive impairment, the first step on the road to dementia, based on their ability to smell things. And among those individuals with mild cognitive impairment, you can predict which ones will develop Alzheimer's disease. And among those individuals, you can predict which ones will descend rapidly into their dementia based on their ability to smell things. So it is a very powerful association between those two. You also see this in Parkinson's disease. The loss of olfaction come years before promoted benefits. And you can actually improve the olfactory ability with olfactory training in those individuals. And it may be a potential way to treat people who have Parkinson's disease.
You're blowing my mind. You really are. I mean, because I can see in my head how this could happen. I can certainly, as soon as you pull away the barriers of, that smell is an important, that it's just critical to brain function. As soon as you set that as a standard and say, okay, this is true. Odorants are important to brain function. Now, any mental disorder, actually, you have to, or you probably should be looking at the olfactory system in coordination with that disease because of the clear links between it and so many other diseases. And is it always the canary in the coal mine? Is this just something that it is the first thing that no matter what mental disorder you have, this is the first thing that you can get as an outward measurement of something going on?
Yeah, and if it would be great if people gave them olfactory enrichment after they realized that things were deteriorating in some way. Even better would be to use it before that happens, just as a matter of course.
Well,
So it's the difference between going to the dentist and getting your teeth drilled and brushing your teeth and flossing them every day.
well, our government can't even go with a vitamin D supplement, which would have significantly reduced the amount of COVID. So to think that the way that medicine is set up in this country, that we're going to be doing odorant therapy, I think is, I hate to say it, but laughable. Even though I'm sitting here thinking, when is this device getting on the market? I'm definitely getting one. I'm serious. Like, I'm definitely having one. So
right. So yeah, we've had a very big response to the publication of this article, and people around the world are interested in giving themselves olfactory stimulation, and we were impressed by how many people were not only interested, but interested in starting this as soon as they can.
yeah, myself included. Yeah,
Right.
it's really stunning. Like, I didn't know you had, I mean, before we started talking, I didn't know you had a device. I read your paper.
Right.
I was thinking, well, we're probably going to spend some time talking about the MRIs and how you measured the area and what area of the slices. We don't need to discuss any of that today. There's way too many other things to discuss.
Yeah. So it's within the first 2 weeks of the publication, there have been 150,000 people who've read the article, which is really astonishing.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a big, like, for anybody who doesn't know, getting 5,000 reads or 10,000 reads on your article when it's published, that's a lot. When you get into the 100,000 range, now you're talking as if Tupac came back from the dead and released a new album.
So there've been over 100 news stories around the world where people have picked up on this. And
here's a more holistic question, but it feeds right into your work. Ancient cultures combined music, meditation, and odorant stimulation. Now, this is all ancient cultures did this at one level or another. Many disciplines that have been carried over thousands of years to the modern day still use this practice. Could it be that actually those things are the things that were lost and why, in part, human health is crumbling? Because as many advances as we've made that we can use drugs that mask symptoms by giving you other symptoms to worry about. And yes, you don't have to kill tigers anymore before you eat your meals. So that, that helps with longevity so that you don't get grave injuries as you're young that cause you to die at an earlier age. But these were the things that were done, and all of them have scientific literature to support that they improve brain function, that they increase neural activity, that they do these things. Is this what we're missing?
So, it's hard to answer sort of evolutionary questions, but clearly, the more stimulation that your brain gets, the better. And when you realize that we're not getting in much olfactory stimulation, we can get more if we think about it. But the same thing about hearing things. So people start to lose their hearing as they get older. You can improve memory and ward off much of the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease by getting hearing aids. But unfortunately, they're very expensive and people don't like to use them. And men, particularly, who are 5 times as likely to have hearing problems as women, don't want to use them because they feel it makes them look old. So the combination of all those things and just dealing with putting things in your ear and means that very few people who need that kind of stimulation are getting it. So people get a lot of TV action, but it turns out that is not effective in giving you the kind of stimulation that your brain needs. So
Clearly,
my feeling
clearly.
it's yeah, you just need as much stimulation as your brain can get. It becomes more difficult as your senses start to wane, and so you need to make a special effort at that point.
But it sounds like it's really the diversity of signals, because you're right. We know things like television that doesn't help. That doesn't help with, say, Alzheimer's, but video games can have an impact. But that's what now you've moved into a completely different realm, because now you're in activity. You have to coordinate what's going on the screen with what you're doing with your hands and potentially with what you're hearing. So now you're getting this more immersive stimulation.
Yeah, that's been shown to help memory. Exercise has also been shown to help, and the issue with all of those things is that it's hard to get people to do them. So, exercise, everybody knows exercise is good for you. And among older adults, only 15% of men and 10% of women exercise on a regular basis.
I would argue that the modern lifestyle, I don't think that people don't want to do it. I really don't believe that, because anybody that you talk to that's struggling with weight or struggling with stress, we know that one of the number one reducers of stress is exercise. Like, you're having a stressful day, do 20 minutes of hard exercise, and that stress will largely be gone till you are done with that exercise. But modern life is not conducive to that, because, and especially in this country right now, where you have 50% of the people below the poverty line that have to work 2 jobs just to even barely scratch to a living wage, where's the time to do any of this? No, I'm running from my job at Walmart to go to my job at the Sheetz gas station and work another 8-hour shift. And then I'm going to go home and go to sleep, and I'm going to eat the crappy food at Walmart, and I'm going to eat the crappy food at my Sheetz job, and that's my day. And this is half of Americans.
Yeah, so it's what I like about the olfactory enrichment idea is that people can do it without any effort. And that is the key, I think, to get universal compliance. As soon as you ask somebody who's 70 years old to go on an exercise bike for 45 minutes 4 times a week,
that's not happening.
Or if it does, they'll get repetitive use injuries, which, they do the same thing over and over again, and the muscles are just not going to put up with that.
I mean, I'm at 52 and I get repetitive use injuries.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to get people to do these things. Even, entertaining video games, people will do them for a while, and most of them will just stop doing them. And so it's a key to stimulating the brain, particularly as people get older, is that you need to do it without any kind of effort. And as far as I know, the olfactory system is the only way to do that.
Well, it's a great one, that's for sure. And it's also really pleasant. Like if you're getting, what are the types of odors that you use? Like spearmint, peppermint, rose,
Yes.
peaches,
Lemon,
pears, lemons.
lemon, orange, lavender. They're just very pleasant natural odors. And it's something that people enjoy smelling because they're pleasant. Eucalyptus, for example, people enjoy. And that was the idea. We just wanted natural, pleasant odors that people would like to have. And that turns out to be fine because people not only like them, they use them, and that works out fine. So just to give you a heads up, I have 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were
so-
on such a tight time frame. So let's do this.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you a couple more real quick questions. One, have you ever tried frankincense or myrrh?
We haven't, but that would be an interesting choice.
Well, have you ever smelled frankincense?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's considered this wonderful thing, but it is actually. But it took me a second to get used to that odor, and I wonder because these were carried through the millennia. I wonder if those aren't some type of super scent, that was used in ritual because of stimulatory purposes. No different than using, a psychedelic in those, which have been used, by the all of the Greek scholars and through Rome, and I wonder.
Yeah, so it could be because they're easily accessed. It could be that they don't go bad. It could be that people just like the smell of it. But yeah, it's been around for a long, long time. And
well, it was worth more than gold at one time.
People would be. People might prefer to have that odor, but from what we know, it's really the number of odors that is critical, not the particular selection of individual odors.
Okay, so maybe you could just tell us once again, when is this odorant diffuser that does all of the work for you come out? Where can we get it? And when you do your next paper, I hope you come back, because I would love to have even more time to open up this this can of scents that you've put out in the world now.
Yeah. So the device is called Memory Air, and people can go to memoryair.com and sign up to be notified about it. And it puts out 40 odors twice a night as you're sleeping with no effort. You literally change the cartridge once a month, press a button, and you don't even have to press a button from that point on.
That's fantastic. Well, Micheal, thank you so much for your time. I really hope we get to do this again, and I will really be looking forward to getting my odorizer. I can't wait.
Okay. Great to talk to you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
you too. All right, bye-bye.